The train reached Ash Creek almost 2 hours late. Mara Vale knew the letter had lied before she ever saw the man who wrote it. Not because the ink was false, not because the words were cruel, because any promise that sounded too polished had usually been folded around something ugly. She stood on the depot platform with one carpet bag, one winter shawl too thin for Dakota wind, and a proposal letter softened at the creases from being read too many times. Dear Miss Vale, I am a man of steady habits and respectable standing. My claim is improving every season. I seek a wife of quiet temperament, useful hands, and honest Christian character. Come to Ash Creek before the frost. If we suit, we may make an orderly life. Abel Crow. Orderly. That was the word she had repeated through Nebraska, through Iowa, through every mile of rail that carried her farther from the laundry rooms and boarding house kitchens, where she had spent most of her 23 years being useful to other people. Orderly sounded like a floor that did not move under you. Orderly sounded like a door that closed against weather. Orderly sounded like a chair at a table where nobody had to ask whether you had earned your supper that day. Then Abel Crow walked out of the depot office and looked at her, not at her face first, at the hem of her dress, at the carpet bag, at her gloves, carefully mended in 2 different colors of thread. His expression tightened before he said a word. You're Miss Vale. I am. She held out her hand. He did not take it. The few men standing near the freight scale went quiet in the way people go quiet when a small cruelty is about to become entertainment. Crow was a broad man in a brushed wool coat, with a gold watch chain across his vest and the look of someone who expected the world to keep a path clear for him. You looked sturdier in your photograph, he said. Mara kept her hand out for 1 more second, then she lowered it. I did not send a photograph, Mr. Crow. His mouth moved, just slightly. He had forgotten which lie belonged to which woman. Well, he said, glancing toward the men by the freight scale, that hardly matters now. I have reconsidered the arrangement. The arrangement? This was only correspondence, nothing binding. No, she said, only a train ticket, 6 months of letters, and the understanding that you asked me to come. A man near the scale coughed into his hand. Crow's face reddened. I said I have reconsidered. There is another lady coming from Council Bluffs, better suited. I am sorry you misunderstood. He was not sorry. He was angry that she had made his bad faith visible. Then he tipped his hat with the neat small movement of a man closing a transaction and walked away. Mara stayed where she was. She had 86 cents. She had a hair comb wrapped in cloth, 2 changes of underthings, a sewing kit, a Bible with her mother's name in it, and no ticket back east. She had sold her good boots for this journey and traveled in the repaired pair. She had left nothing behind that could take her back. Nothing with a key in it. Nothing with a bed waiting. The wind pushed grit along the platform boards. Mara looked at the road leading out of Ash Creek. 1 blacksmith, 1 livery, 1 church with peeling whitewash, 1 general store. 1 town full of strangers who had just watched her be weighed and refused. Her throat tightened. She let it tighten. Then she made it stop. Crying was a thing you did when it helped. Here it would only feed people. A shadow fell across the bench behind her. Miss Vale, she turned. The man standing there wore a sheriff's badge and a buffalo coat gone shiny at the cuffs. He was not young, but the country had put enough weather on him that age was only a guess. Jonah Bell, he said. Sheriff. I saw what happened. I imagine half the town did. Less than half. More than enough. He waited as if giving her the dignity of not being handled too quickly. You got kin here? No. Money for a room? Not for more than 1 night. That answer means no. It means not for more than 1 night. For the first time something like a smile touched his eyes. All right. He leaned 1 shoulder against the depot post and looked down the road, not at her, which made the conversation easier. What can you do? Mara looked at him carefully. It was a practical question. Practical questions deserved honest accounting. I can cook for 6 with food meant for 4. I can mend cloth, leather, harness if the damage is not too far gone. I can read and write a clean hand. I can keep accounts. I know soap making, preserving, pickling, poultices, and the difference between thrift and starvation. I can milk, churn 10 chickens, and learn whatever I do not know. The sheriff nodded slowly. You say all that like an inventory. It is one. He looked at the road again. There's a place 9 miles north, Calder Ridge, belongs to Eli Mercer. Wife died last winter. 4 children. Farm's been sliding sideways ever since. He needs help, but he won't say it. He cannot pay wages worth speaking of. I am not asking wages. That made him look at her. She heard herself say the next part before fear had time to dress it up. A bowl of supper, a dry corner, work enough to earn both. Sheriff Bell studied her face for a long moment. Then he said, Crow is a smaller man than he looks. Mara picked up her carpet bag. Most are. Calder Ridge was not a ridge so much as a long rise of hard grass and stubborn soil, with the Mercer house set against the wind like it was bracing its shoulders. Mara saw the problems before the wagon stopped. A barn door hung wrong. The woodpile was too low. The chicken run had wire loose along the west side. One chimney smoked badly. The kitchen garden had not been properly put to bed before frost. A milk cow near the fence stood with one hind hoof held wrong. Problems were frightening when you could not name them. Once named, they became work. And work was something Mara understood. Eli Mercer came out of the barn carrying a broken singletree in one hand. He was tall, dark-haired, and built by labor rather than vanity. There was gray at his temples and mud to his knees. He looked at Sheriff Bell, then at Mara, then at the carpet bag in her hand. Not suspicious exactly, tired, deeply, practically tired. Jonah, he said. Ellie, this is Mara Vale. She came west for an arrangement that failed on the platform. Eli's jaw shifted. Crow? Crow. That was all the sheriff said. It seemed to be enough. Eli looked at Mara again. I cannot hire. I know. I have 4 children. I was told. The house is not in order. I can see that. Something moved at the edge of his mouth, not a smile, but the place where one might have been if the season had allowed it. You are direct. I am cold. That almost did it. Almost. He looked past her to the gray sky. What are you asking? 1 bowl of supper a day, a dry corner to sleep in. I will work for the rest. The silence after that was not empty. Sheriff Bell looked at Eli. Eli looked at Mara. Mara looked at the house. She did not lower her eyes, not because she was proud, though she had some pride left, because she had learned that people decide what you are worth in the first few seconds of your needing them, and if you look away too soon, they often lower the price. Eli rubbed a hand across the back of his neck. There is a pantry room off the kitchen. It is drafty. I have slept in worse. I do not doubt it. He looked toward the house. My eldest is June. She will show you where things are. Supper is in an hour. It was not welcome. But it was not refusal. Mara carried her bag up the porch steps. She allowed herself one breath of relief, only one. Then she opened the door and began counting what needed doing. June Mercer was 14 and had already learned the face of a woman twice that age. She stood in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed and her chin lifted. You are the woman Mr. Crow left at the depot. Yes, he does that. Mara paused. How often? Enough. There it was, the missing piece. Crow had not made one careless decision. He had made a habit and dressed it as discernment. Mara filed that away. I am not here for Mr. Crow. Then why are you here? Because your father needs help and I need a roof. Those 2 facts have met each other. June's eyes narrowed. You talk like a school primer. I have been accused of worse. The corner of June's mouth moved, but she caught it before it became anything generous. She showed Mara the pantry room. It had a narrow cot, 1 cracked wash basin, and a stovepipe that had been sealed badly with old cloth. Cold air came through the floorboards in steady little streams. Mara set down her carpet bag. Then June showed her the rest of the house. It was not filthy. That was the first important truth. It was the house of people who had tried, failed, tried again, and run out of hands. Clean plates stacked wherever there was space. Ash swept from the hearth but not under the stove. A cradle no one used anymore pushed against the wall because no one knew where grief should be stored. Curtains patched with flour sacks. 3 children watching from different doorways. Will was 12, narrow-shouldered and suspicious. Ruth was 8, pale-haired, solemn, and too quick to apologize for standing in the way. Little Ben was 5 and walked straight up to Mara's carpet bag. What is inside my things? What things? Clothes. A sewing roll. A book. What book? The Psalms. Does it have bears? No. He looked disappointed. After suppers, Mara said, I can show you where the lions are mentioned. That seemed to restore his faith in the arrangement. June watched this and Mara watched June watching. The girl was taking inventory too. That was going to matter. The first supper Mara cooked in the Mercer kitchen was made from cornmeal, a heel of salt pork, 2 soft onions, and beans that had been boiled too fast and gone tough. She did not criticize the beans. She mashed half of them, simmered them slowly with the onion and pork fat, then folded them back into the pot so the meal felt thicker than it was. She made flat corn cakes instead of a pan loaf because flat cakes looked like more when placed one by one on plates. No one praised the meal, that was all right. Praise was not the first sign that work mattered. The first sign was silence. 4 children and 1 exhausted man ate without speaking until the pot was empty. Ben spilled water near his plate and froze. Mara reached for a cloth. "Cups tip," she said. "That is why tables have floors." Ben stared at her. Then he laughed once, surprised. Ruth looked at him like she had forgotten he could make that sound. Eli noticed. Mara noticed Eli noticing. After supper, June dried dishes beside her. The silence between them had edges, but it was workable. "Your mother kept this kitchen?" Mara asked. June's hand stopped on a cup. "Yes. I will not pretend I know how she did it. If I move something important, tell me." June looked at her as if this answer had not been on the list of possible answers. "She kept the flour scoop in the blue crock. Then it will stay there." Another silence, softer this time. "She made corn cakes thin too," June said, "when meal was low." Mara handed her the next plate. "Then she was sensible." June did not answer, but she dried the plate carefully and set it in the right place. That night in the pantry room, Mara slept in her shawl and coat under 2 thin blankets. The wind came up through the boards and found every bone she had. She did not sleep much. Instead, she made her first accounting of Calder Ridge, wood, short by at least 2 cords, flour low, beans more than anyone seemed to know but badly stored, salt enough if watched, dried apples nearly gone, potatoes sprouting in the wrong corner of the cellar, 2 chickens likely to stop laying if the cold got worse, 1 cow limping, 4 children who had learned not to ask for more, and Eli Mercer, a man holding the outside work together by force and stubbornness, while the inside of the house frayed behind him. Not because he did not care, because grief had reduced his field of vision. Mara understood that. Hunger did the same thing. Cold did it. Fear did it. A person could be good and still miss things. Before dawn, she rose. By the time Eli came into the kitchen, the stove was hot, coffee was boiled, the cow had been milked, the trough ice had been broken, and Mara was kneeling by the hearth with ash on her sleeve, repairing the draft plate. He stopped in the doorway. "I meant to do the milking. The cow was already full." "That is not an answer. It is the reason." He looked at the milk pail, then at her hands. "You know cows, I know discomfort. Animals announce it more honestly than people." The almost smile came closer. "Bess is favoring her right hind hoof," Mara said. "Not a stone. The frog smells sour. If it is thrush starting, you will want it clean today." Eli stared at her. "Jonah said you could cook. I can do several things at once." June came in behind him and heard that. Mara could feel the girl recalculating, not approving, not yet, only recalculating. By the end of the first week, Mara had repaired the stovepipe in the pantry room with a strip of tin from a broken flour can, patched Will's coat at the cuffs, made a ledger from unused pages at the back of an old hymnal, and moved the potatoes into a dry bin lined with straw. She did not announce any of it. Announcements made people defend old failures. Results simply sat there until everyone adjusted. She learned the land around Calder Ridge the same way she learned a kitchen, by walking it, touching it, and remembering. The creek bottom held rose hips, bitter but useful. The south bank still had wild onions beneath the frost. A stand of willow could be cut for tea if fever came. There were dry cattail heads that could help start fires when the kindling ran low. A shallow hollow behind the barn stayed out of the wind and could keep smoked meat cold without freezing too hard. She brought things back quietly, June noticed first. Of course she did. One afternoon, Mara was slicing wild onions at the kitchen table when June stopped in the doorway. "Where did those come from?" "Creek bank. We never find anything there. You have to look before the frost takes the tops. We have lived here 8 years. I have lived hungry in more places than that." June came to the table. "Can you show me?" Mara did not make it tender. Tenderness would have frightened the girl off. At first light, June nodded. The next morning she was ready before Mara was. That was when Mara began to understand the child. June did not want comfort. She wanted tools, so Mara gave her tools. How to tell good rose hips from spoiled ones. How to dry onion greens near heat without scorching them. How to line jars so they did not crack in a cold cellar. How to count food without making the counting feel like fear. June learned quickly and said little. But the next time Ruth asked if there would be enough supper, June answered before Mara could. "There will be enough if we do not waste, not cheerful, not false. Enough, That was a start. November tightened. The first real storm came in sideways, striking the house after midnight with sleet that sounded like nails thrown against glass. Mara woke instantly. Not because of the storm, because the house answered it wrong. There was a rattle from the back pantry wall, a loose shutter on the north side, and the long, low groan of the barn door taking wind it should not be taking. She got up, wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, and was in the kitchen when Eli came down pulling on his coat. They looked at each other. "Barn door," he said. "North shutter. Children? Still asleep. Stay in." "No." He opened his mouth. She was already taking the lantern from the hook. Outside, the cold hit like a hand. The barn door had torn one hinge loose. Eli braced it with his shoulder while Mara found the dropped pin in mud half frozen to iron. Her fingers went numb. Twice the wind nearly took the lantern. She wedged the pin back, then held the board while Eli hammered it through. Neither spoke. There are kinds of partnership that begin before anyone calls them that. This was one of them. When they came back inside, June was standing in the kitchen with Ben wrapped in a quilt and Ruth clinging to the edge of her nightdress. "I told them it was only wind," June said. "It mostly was," Mara answered. June looked at her wet skirt, at Eli's bleeding knuckles, at the lantern smoking in her hand. "Mostly," June said. The word held more trust than it looked like. December came early and hard. The road to Ash Creek became first unpleasant, then dangerous, then theoretical. The Mercers pulled the animals closer to the barn. The children spent more hours inside. Mara turned the kitchen into the warm center of the house and guarded its heat like money. She began using the ledger every night. Food in, food out, wood burned, wood remaining, eggs gathered, milk saved, salt measured, beans soaked, meat stretched. Eli saw the ledger 2 weeks before Christmas. He stood behind her chair long enough that she knew he was reading the columns. "You have been keeping books." "Yes, for my house, for the food. That is not different." She turned the pencil between her fingers. "I can stop if you prefer." He looked at the numbers. "No." Then after a long moment, "Is it bad?" She could have softened it. Softness was useful for children and wounds. Numbers needed clean edges. "We are not starving, we are not safe either." His jaw worked. "What is short? Flour, fat, wood, salt if the winter runs long, and rest." He looked at her then. "Rest? You most of all." He gave a tired sound that might have been humor if it had more strength behind it. "Rest does not split wood." "No, but a man who falls over in January does not split wood either." June, who had been pretending not to listen near the stove, looked down quickly. Eli saw that. Mara saw him see it. That night he did not stay in the barn past supper. Small victories did not look like much from the outside. Inside a winter they mattered. Christmas at Calder Ridge was made of scraps. Mara carved Ben a little whistle from willow and prayed it would not become a regret. She sewed Ruth a pocket into her dress because Ruth collected small stones and had been losing them all over the house. She made Will a rabbit skin lining for his mittens from pelts he had trapped and pretended not to care about. For June, she copied 12 preserving recipes into the back of the ledger in her neatest hand. June held the pages for a long time. "My mother had recipes," she said. "I know. No, I do not know where she put them." Mara understood what the girl did not say. A dead woman's recipe was not a recipe. It was a door that might not open. "We can rebuild what you remember," Mara said. "Not all at once." June folded the pages. She made chokecherry butter. "Then in spring, if we find the fruit, you will teach me." June looked startled. "I do not know it right." "Then we will learn it wrong first." That was the first time June laughed without catching herself. Eli was in the doorway when it happened. He looked at his daughter like a man seeing a lamp lit in a room he thought had gone permanently dark. Mara looked away. Some moments belonged to a family before they belonged to anyone else. January punished every weak place. The cold settled over the claim and stopped moving. The pump froze twice. The barn roof collected ice. The road vanished. The world narrowed to chores, heat, food, and the next calculation. Then the cellar door failed. It happened after a night of hard wind. Mara went down before dawn with a lantern and felt the air wrong halfway down the steps. Too sharp, too dry, too much of outside. The top hinge had split the wood. Cold had poured through the gap for hours. 3 crocks near the door were frozen at the edges. A shelf of turnips had softened. 2 jars of apple slices had cracked. The last small crock of butter had gone grainy from cold. Mara stood still, accounting first, panic later if there was time. Most of the deep shelves were unharmed. The beans were safe. The smoked rabbit was safe. The onions wrapped in straw were safe. The jars she had tucked behind the stone pier were safe. Loss, yes. Ruin, no. She climbed the stairs and went to Eli's door. He was awake before she knocked twice. What? The cellar took cold. We need to move fast. He came down fully dressed, as if he had never trusted sleep anyway. Together they carried the damaged turnips into the kitchen, brought the cracked jars up before the glass could spread, and packed blankets against the cellar door while Eli rehung the hinge with a strip of wagon iron. No one spoke until the sun came up. Then Will came into the kitchen, saw the turnips piled on the table, and understood more than a boy should. How bad? Mara looked at him. He had earned directness. Bad enough that nothing gets wasted. Not bad enough that fear helps. He absorbed that. Then he washed his hands and started trimming the soft parts from the turnips without being asked. That was Will. He did not trust speeches. He trusted being given a knife and something useful to cut away. For 3 days the house ate what the cold had almost taken. Turnip soup, turnip hash, turnip cakes made with a fistful of meal and more imagination than honesty. Apple slices boiled down into sour sauce and saved in the one jar that had not cracked. Ben complained on the second day. Ruth kicked him under the table. Mara pretended not to see. On the 4th night after the children slept, she set the ledger in front of Eli and showed him the new count. His face did not change. That told her everything. How long? He asked. At current portions, 5 weeks. 5 weeks brings us to mid-February, yes. The road may not open until March, yes. He looked at the ledger as if staring hard enough could shame the numbers into decency. Mara reached into her apron pocket and placed a second folded paper on the table. There is something else. His eyes lifted. She told him about the reserve. Not the main stores. Not the shelves everyone used. The reserve. A flour sack tucked inside the false bottom of the oat bin, 2 jars of rosehip paste behind the loose pantry board, dried onion greens wrapped in cloth under her cot, a small crock of rendered fat sealed with wax, 4 smoked rabbits she had not entered into the common count yet, a twist of salt she had saved pinch by pinch since November. Eli did not move, so she kept speaking. I did not keep it from you to deceive you. I kept it because there are moments when a house needs one more answer than everyone thinks it has. He looked at the folded paper. How long with that? Into the first week of March if we are careful. He put one hand over his eyes. For a moment, he was not the man with the barn and the children and the hard country on his shoulders. He was only a tired father who had been lying awake beside a math problem that ended with his children hungry. When he lowered his hand, his voice was rough. You let me sit with the wrong number. I know. Why? Mara looked down at her own hands. Because the real answer was not flattering. Not to her. Not to the life that had made her. Because I have learned not to show everything I have until I know whether it will be taken. The room went very quiet. The fire clicked in the stove. Eli's expression changed then. Not anger leaving, understanding arriving. That is a hard way to have had to live, he said. She swallowed once. Yes, he slid the paper back to her. From now on we count together. She nodded. And Mara? She looked up. You are not a guest trying to justify a blanket. Not anymore. She did not know what to do with that sentence, so she folded it carefully inside herself and kept it where the cold could not reach. The darkest week came in February. Not with one disaster, with several small ones walking in together. Will came down feverish after checking snares. The pump froze solid. One hen died. The cow's milk dropped. The sky turned white and stayed white. Mara slept in pieces, an hour in the chair by Will's bed, 20 minutes by the stove, a few minutes leaning against the pantry wall while bread failed to rise in the cold. She used willow bark for Will's fever and broth from bones already boiled twice. She made him drink. He cursed the taste. She took that as a hopeful sign. On the second night, Ruth came to the kitchen in her blanket. Is he going to die? Mara turned from the stove. The easy lie stood ready. She did not use it. I do not think so. Ruth's eyes filled. But you are not sure. No. Are you scared? Mara sat beside her. Yes. Ruth looked startled. But I am still useful while scared, Mara said. That is the trick. Ruth thought about this with solemn attention. Can I be useful? You can sit by him for 10 minutes and call me if his breathing changes. Ruth straightened like someone had handed her a rank. I can do that. I know. Through the doorway, Eli stood in the hall, unseen by Ruth. He heard it. Mara knew he heard it. He said nothing. But later, when Mara came out to refill the basin, a cup of coffee waited on the kitchen table exactly where her hand would reach for it. No note, no speech. Just coffee. That was how Eli Mercer spoke when words were too full. Will's fever broke before dawn. Mara was beside the bed when his skin cooled under her palm. She stayed there 1 full minute longer, because moving too soon after fear lets go can make a person shake. Then she went into the hallway. Eli stood up. "Broke," she said. His shoulders dropped, only an inch, enough to see what the night had cost him. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. Mara could have said many things. Instead, she said, "He will be hungry when he wakes." Eli gave one short laugh. It was almost painful to hear. "Then we had better have something ready." They did. They had thin soup with fat melted on top, and the last of the good bread warmed over the stove. Will ate half a bowl and complained there was not enough salt. June cried in the pantry where no one would see. Mara found her there and said nothing. After a while, June wiped her face with her sleeve. "I am not crying. No, I mean it. I believe you." June looked at her, and then the absurdity of that mercy caught them both. They laughed quietly in the pantry while the rest of the house breathed easier. By late February, the weather began losing its argument. The wind still cut, the nights still froze, but the snow near the south wall turned grainy, and the eaves began to drip at noon. The first wagon came through on a Wednesday. Sheriff Bell rode beside it, his horse picking the ruts with offended dignity. He took coffee at the Mercer table and looked around the kitchen the way a sheriff looks around a place he once feared might become an inquest. "Everybody standing," he said. "More or less," Eli answered. Bell looked at Mara. "I have a proposition to bring you." Eli did not move. June at the sink went completely still. Mara set down the coffee pot. "From whom?" "Harmon's store. Mrs. Harmon is leaving for her daughter's place in Cheyenne. Old Harmon needs a woman who can keep books, write correspondence, manage orders, and not be fooled by every traveling salesman with shiny teeth." "That last part is rare," Mara said. Bell nodded. "He knows. What pay?" He named it. "Real wages, room behind the store, board included, a lock on the door, cash every month. Not charity. Not a corner earned by the hour. Not the uncertain mercy of a household that might need her less in spring. A position, a life with her own account." Mara felt the room around her, the stove she had learned, the table with one leg shimmed by a folded seed catalog, Ben's slate on the bench, Ruth's stones in her new pocket, Will's snares drying by the door, June's preserving pages tucked into the ledger, Eli's silence across the table. "I will give him an answer Friday," she said. Bell nodded. When he left, no one chased the subject. That was almost worse. Eli went to the barn. June dried the same cup 3 times. Will found an excuse to carry wood. Ruth sat with her sewing and put the needle in crooked. Ben was the only honest one. "Are you moving to the store?" "I am thinking." "Can stores have lions in the Psalms?" "Yes," he frowned. "Then that does not help." Mara almost smiled. "No, it does not." That night, Eli came in after the children were asleep. Mara sat at the table with the ledger open, though she had not written a number in 10 minutes. He stood by the stove. "Harmon is fair," he said. "Yes, the pay is good. Yes, you would have your own room. Yes, and a lock." She looked up. He had remembered. She had mentioned it once, months ago, talking about boarding houses and doors that did not latch. He had remembered. "I would," she said. He nodded. Then he took off his hat and set it on the table, which meant he was done circling. "I would rather you stayed." The words were plain, not polished, not arranged to flatter, just there. Mara's heart moved once. Hard, as what? He met her eyes. That mattered. "Hired help is not what I mean." "Then say what you mean." He drew a breath. "As my wife, if you could want that. As June and Will and Ruth and Ben's family, if they can have the time to want it properly. As a woman with a full place here, not a corner you are still earning." The kitchen seemed very small around the sentence. Mara looked at the ledger. All winter, numbers had saved them because numbers refused pretense. So she used the same honesty now. "I came here asking for 1 bowl of supper and a dry corner because I thought that was all I could ask from anyone. I have spent most of my life making a small claim on the world so nobody would be tempted to take it from me." Eli listened. "If I stay," she said, "I do not stay as a debt. I do not stay as the woman who should be grateful because you did not turn her out. I do not stay in some half place that changes according to how useful I am. No." The word came quickly. Then again, slower. "No, what are you asking me to be?" he answered without looking away. "Equal to the life, not less than it." Her throat tightened. She looked toward the dark window because his face was too much to look at for a moment. I need to speak to Harmon myself, of course. I need to hear the terms, yes, and then I will decide, yes. She waited for him to add something, a plea, a pressure, a reminder of the children, a debt dressed as affection. He added nothing. That was one of the reasons she did not sleep much that night. Not because she was uncertain, because she was beginning to understand she might not need to be afraid of being certain. On Friday, Mara drove to Ash Creek alone. The town looked smaller than it had in October. The depot platform was still there, the freight scale, the bench where she had sat with 86 cents and a letter that had become useless in her pocket. She went into Harmon's store. Harmon showed her the room, small, clean, one window over the alley, a stove in working order, a bolt on the inside of the door. He showed her the books. They were orderly but behind. She could see 3 mistakes in 5 minutes and said nothing because pointing them out before accepting the work felt like showing off. You could begin in 2 weeks, Harmon said. I could. You want the post? It is a good post. That is not what I asked. Mara looked at the ledgers, then at the room, then at the door with its bolt. I have wanted something like this for years. Harmon nodded as if that answered more than yes would have. On her way out, she saw Abel Crow. He was crossing from the barber's with his coat brushed and his watch chain bright. He stopped when he recognized her. Then his face did a quick, ugly little adjustment. He had heard the story. Everyone had. The woman he left on the platform. The woman who went north to Calder Ridge. The woman who helped the Mercers survive a winter that had taken livestock from richer men. Miss Vale, he said, changing direction toward her. I was hoping we might speak. We are speaking. His smile stiffened. I have had time to reflect on October. That is useful for you. I may have acted hastily. No, Mara said. You acted clearly. He blinked. She found that she felt no anger. Anger would have tied a thread between them, and there was no thread left. I judged without full knowledge, he tried. You judged with the tools you had. That is not. Good day, Mr. Crow. His face hardened. Mercer's place is still poor ground. Mara stepped up into the wagon. Then it is fortunate I have practice making poor ground feed people. She took the reins and drove away. She did not look back. At the edge of town she stopped, not because she needed to think, because for the first time in years no one was forcing the shape of her next step. She had a paid room behind her, a hard farm before her, a man waiting without pushing, 4 children pretending not to care too visibly. She had a choice, a real one. That was why it mattered. She turned the wagon toward Calder Ridge. When she reached the rise, Ben saw her first and ran across the yard so fast he nearly fell. Did you tell the store no? Not yet. His face dropped. I came home first. That answer satisfied him less, but he took her hand anyway. Eli was by the barn. He did not come forward until she crossed the yard. I saw Harmon, she said. He nodded. The offer is exactly what Belle said. Another nod. I saw Crow. That changed his face. Did he trouble you? He tried, and he remains himself. Eli almost smiled. That is punishment enough. It surprised a laugh out of her, a real one. The sound startled both of them. June appeared in the doorway, saw Mara laughing, saw Eli looking at her, and rolled her eyes with the solemn disgust of a girl who had known something for weeks and was tired of adults arriving late. Mara gave Harmon her answer the next morning. She rode in, thanked him, and declined. He was not surprised. Calder Ridge, he said. Yes, you know what you are choosing. That was a fair question. She looked toward the north road, where the ground was still scarred from winter and the wind had not softened just because the calendar had. Yes, she said. I know enough to choose it. When she came back, Eli was not at the house. He was at the south fence replacing posts loosened by frost. She walked out through the muddy yard. He looked up. I told Harmon no. The fence post stayed in his hand. He was very still. Then he set it down carefully. All right, he said. It was not enough for what moved through his face. It was exactly enough for him. Mara stopped on the other side of the fence. I am not giving up security because I do not value it. I know. I am not staying because the children need me. They do. That is not why. I know. She looked at him. Ask me properly. He came around the fence, mud on his boots, work shirt patched at one elbow, hair windblown, a man with dead children, damaged fences, and the kind of steadiness that did not sparkle until tested. Vale, he said, will you marry me? No speech, no poetry, no polished promise hiding an ugly thing inside it. Just a plain question from a man who understood that plain things could still carry weight. Yes, she said. His eyes closed for half a second. When he opened them, the whole hard season seemed to stand between them and behind them at once. Not gone, part of the ground now. They told the children at supper. Or rather, June told them, because June had apparently decided the adults had wasted enough time. Papa and Mara are marrying, she said while passing the beans, so everyone may stop acting strange. Will stared into his bowl. Then he nodded once. Mara nodded back. That was a full conversation in Will's language. Ruth smiled first at Mara, then at Eli, then at June, as if checking whether happiness was permitted. June lifted one shoulder. Permission granted. Ben said, "Will you still sleep near the kitchen?" Not always. He considered this. "Will you still know where the lions are?" Yes. Then all right. They were married in May when the grass finally proved it meant to return. Sheriff Bell stood in the yard with a paper in his hand and a clean collar that bothered him visibly. June held a bunch of wild chokecherry blossoms and corrected Ben twice for standing on Mara's skirt. Will stood beside Eli with his arms folded like a guard posted against foolishness. Ruth cried before the ceremony began and denied it afterward. Mara wore the blue dress she had repaired until it had become less a garment than an argument. Eli took her hands, working hands around working hands. He said the words clearly, so did she. There was no thunderclap, no miracle, no sudden transformation into a woman who had never been left on a platform or hungry in a rented room. She was still Mara, that was the point. She was still the woman who counted flour, watched weather, saved salt, and noticed when a child had not eaten enough. She was still the woman who had learned to keep one answer hidden because life had taught her that safety could be taken by anyone stronger, richer, louder, or more careless. But now, when she counted, someone counted with her. When she stored food, it was not fear alone doing the work. When she sat at the table, no one was measuring whether she had earned the chair. After the ceremony, she and June made chokecherry butter from the first fruit they could gather, even though it took too long and stained both their fingers dark red. June said her mother's version had been smoother. Mara said, "Then we will make the next batch smoother." June looked at her. "The next batch," she repeated. Yes, something in the girl's face eased. Future had entered the room like a cautious animal and found no one trying to frighten it away. That evening, Mara went to the fence line alone. The sun was low, the field was brown and green in uneven patches. The barn door hung straight now. The woodpile had begun again. The house behind her was noisy with ordinary life. Not safe forever. No place was, but real. Eli came to stand beside her. For a while they said nothing. They had earned silences that did not need filling. At last he asked, "What are you thinking?" Mara looked across the land. She thought of Abel Crow's letter, the depot bench, 86 cents, one bowl of supper, one dry corner, the hidden jars behind the loose pantry board, the ledger between two tired people, the storeroom with its bolt, the children around the table. "I am thinking," she said, "that winter counts every mouth in a house." Eli waited. She looked back toward the kitchen window where lamplight had begun to show. "And spring tells you which ones belong." He took her hand. Inside, Ben knocked something over. Will said something sharp. Ruth laughed. June told both of them to stop behaving like wolves. Mara smiled. She had arrived in Ash Creek as an extra mouth, a rejected woman with a soft letter and nowhere to go. But the winter had counted her hands, her judgment, her hunger, her fear, her stubborn refusal to be smaller than survival required, and by the time spring came the house had stopped asking what she cost. It knew what she was worth. She had asked for one bowl and one roof. She had found a place no one could measure away. Winter had counted her as extra. Spring counted her as home.